Hello, Gavin. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate your honesty in all the conversations in online. We had a few interactions. We not always agree on things, but
Right.
what I appreciate is your honesty and always a civilized conversation, which is rare online now. How are you doing
Yeah.
today?
Today's a good day, Liz. Today is a good day. Like I've said repeatedly, it's sort of I've genuinely moved to living one day at a time,
Mm.
and today's a good day.
Could you take us through your martial art background? I know that you are heavily invested in Goju, but
Yeah.
you had first experience with martial arts was more of a army style training, wasn't it?
Yes. I'm from Belfast originally, from Northern Irish family. Got four brothers, and my dad was teacher. He was in the military, and he was teaching armed combat. And Northern Ireland. So this was around the 60s, and Northern Ireland was starting to heat up again, shall we say. And so right up the top end of Ireland where I was born, a place called Limavady, he he was teaching got a sort of a kind of military civilian crossover thing going, mainly judo mixed with the military unarmed combat, and that also had Catholics and Protestants training at the same time, which doesn't mean much in England, but it means a big deal at that time in Northern Ireland. So we were children, of course, but we were sort of along watching that and doing that. So we also moved around a lot. Military family moved around a lot, and with four boys, my dad thought it was important that we knew how to fight because we were going to get into trouble moving schools. It's just the way it is, and we did. And so I trained really from probably about 4 years old. I genuinely don't remember a time when I wasn't training. uh, and then And then I got into Goju around the late 70s, early 80s. I saw a demo by two Goju guys, Kim Roberts and Dave Arnold. I think it was on the Isle of Wight, although I talked to Dave about it a while ago, and our memories differ on it, as they do. But I do remember them watching this demo, and I was kind of fascinated by the violence of it. And then there was this bit where Kim was going to break a chair over Dave or swing a chair at him, but they got the timing wrong, and Kim actually hit him with it, and Dave just went mental, and they just had this big scrap at a school fete, and I thought it was fantastic. So I went over to talk to Kim. Was the one. Kim was the more dynamic of the two. Dave was a bull of a man, still is, an old pugilist, very very tough guy. I went to talk to Kim because Kim was teaching in St. at the time, and I went up to him and said something about I'd like to do it, and he just looked me up and down and walked off, didn't answer. Yeah, and I was sort of left there, and Dave came over and said, "Don't mind him; he's a grumpy old sod type thing." And I had a chat with Dave, and ended up going to see Kim Club, and I joined there, and I was hooked. And you say I'm heavily invested in Goju, and it's true, but I don't now, and never have considered myself a Goju guy. I just haven't found anything that isn't inherently in Goju. To me, Goju sort of sits at the center of the spoked wheel. You know, if you want to, because it's got everything in it. Goju. We're very lucky in Okinawa and the Okinawan styles, and particularly in Goju, that it retained all its grappling and its ground fighting is still intact, whereas that got stripped out when it went to Japan. So we retained all that. But are we as good on the ground as BJJ? No, because for every 1 hour we spend doing it, they do 8. But the principle is that we wouldn't fight them on the ground. You fight them stand up. Are we as good kind of aerial kickers as Taekwondo? Of course not. But we don't really do that. But that's the point, that you reach a stage in your training, if you need to sort of hone those skills up, judo, say the throws, all the throws we do, we're not going to be as good as judo at throwing, because again, we do 1 hour, they do 8, but it's there when you want it. You can go and find those specialists that have it, and Goju kind of sits in the middle. So it's a strength and a weakness, sort of master of, jack of all trades type style.
But I'm kind of on the same page, although I'm coming from Kyokushin, which is kind of sort of loosely related to Goju.
Yeah.
But our main thing is to get out from the floor and stand up. I like throwing because I've been exposed to wrestling.
Yeah.
But I think that's for the karate is for, right? To get out of there. So you need to have a knowledge of all the levels enough so you can get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the way people think is that if you're a really good stand-up fighter, then you should stand up against someone. But it's not that you're looking for. You're looking for the differential. Because we've got a good contacts with the Kyokushin. We've had a few people fight in the knockdown, and we've got some of the Kyokushin come over regularly and visit us, and their stand-up is amazing. I absolutely love it. And but the point is, if you're this level, say, stand-up, and this level grappling, you're looking for the biggest differential in your opponent. So if their kumite is here, but their grappling's right on the ground, then you'll take your weaker one to beat them with. You're looking for where's the biggest differential. Can I fight this guy on the ground, or do I fight them stand up? And you're looking not for your strength, but for their weakness, to do the opposite of their weakness.
Yeah. As you said, you've got people with Kyokushin. It's quite. When I look at your Goju, I was thinking, especially your 30-man kumite and stuff like that. I'm thinking, this is not very traditional Goju because you, I think, incorporated so many different approaches that I see that the knockdown. I don't see that in any other group of Goju. How did you come up to incorporating?
I would argue that you do. You don't see it in Higona's Goju, which has become mainstream. I think if you look at some of the smaller clubs that are in Goju, the thing with Goju, its real strength is our difference. Goju isn't a style like sort of, we don't have 17 wrist locks, 3 kicks, 3. It's not like that. It's a philosophy of hard, soft training and hard, soft conditioning, which isn't unique to Goju. Hard, soft, you walk using hard and soft.
Yeah.
But it's instilled in the hard first. Go means hard. Ju is the same Ju as judo. Jiu-jitsu means soft, so hard first. So hard training to build the body and mind before you get into the softer skills. But all of my Goju instructors, Kim Roberts mainly, Kim Roberts, Nick Hughes, Steve Morris, all grappled, all fought like this. The original Goju fighters that came back here, if you look at kind of Gary Spears, Dave Morris, they didn't fight in that. They're fighters. They have movement. And there is something about what's become traditional karate that makes people stiff and unable to fight. That's not how you fight. And because they're missing the link that those are supposed to, the fight is always going to look the same. The fight looks the same. All the style is a difference of opinion how to teach that. So when we took it into the cage, people were saying, that doesn't look like karate. I'm like, well, what is it you want to see? And of course, they want to see like a reverse punch, which isn't a punch. It's a trigger. You're training the trigger, the mitotic reflex in your shoulder, boom, to get the acceleration. Because acceleration is more in the power dimension. It's mass times acceleration squared, and that square is important because that means that acceleration. If you double your acceleration, you're going to quadruple your impact. If you double your mass, you're only going to double it. So speed is more important. So what people took to be a sort of karate punch isn't a punch. It can be used as one, but it's really training the trigger, and that trigger is in all your punches. So you throw your shoulder, in the dojo, you put your hand back, outside you throw your body forward, that gets the stretch reflex, that accelerates it into someone's head. And so so I personally, I think what we do, and I 100% believe this, is traditional Goju-ryu, and I think what I see out there looks much more like Shotokan in a lot of people, and a lot more of a kind of stylized militaristic view of it. So for me, the tradition of karate is efficiency and effectiveness. That's the tradition. So that's what I would call traditional karate, is a system that seeks efficiency and that works in a real world setting. The people that are trying to replicate what someone did 100 years ago with no change to it, I would call that classical karate. And I would liken that to a kind of reenactment group. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I would liken that to the people that get dressed up in Civil War uniforms and go out, and they have a brilliant time. I'd love to do that myself, but they're not they don't. The difference is they don't think they could go into a modern battle and win using pikes and staffs.
Yeah.
But But to get to your point, you know, where the pull comes in, it is a seek, it is to seek this efficiency. Now, with Goju, all the Goju I've seen, the Dan grades have different functions. They have deliberate different functions, and your second Dan is your main fighting grade.
Mm-hmm.
Now, putting the 30-man around it was just a way of having a standard that everyone had to do, rather than just everyone fights for 2 hours and it depends who you fight, etc., etc. It was just a way of solidifying it and having a way of training, because when I was going up through the grades, the truth is we weren't told what the syllabus was. We didn't know what we were going to be tested on. We didn't know when we were going to be tested. And while that does bring a kind of fear of its own, that fear is very short-lived. Whereas if you declare you're going to do the 30-man in 8 months' time, that fear is 8 months. And that's where the strength comes from. That's the fire that forges it. It's the preparing for it. And I think this is why I don't have any problem failing people, because I'm not surprising with the grading. We've said to them, when you show up, it's 100 press-ups. The first thing you do, 100 press-ups. So if you can't do them, you're out. That's not my fault. You were told.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
But I think people from kind of, I'm going to use again traditional or classical arts, who are not kind of in that frame of what you're doing, don't realize how taxing on the body is the 30-man kumite in a knockdown style, and how much you have to overcome mentally to actually withstand those 30 fresh people trying to demolish your body. Because when you're fighting with the head contact, you're not really putting 100% to kill person, to destroy the body, right? Because it's not safe, and we all want to go to the jobs and stuff. So how what's your experience and your students with being immersed in that heavily taxing fighting just to the body?
So the way it works is that they have, for the 30-man specifically, is they have to declare their intent. Like Cortez burning his boats when he went to the New World so he couldn't return. They have to stand up at winter camp and say, I'm going to do the 30-man. So that's to put pressure on them not to back out, because they've declared it in front of everyone. And then they spend, basically that year, they'd spend just training specifically for this one event. And it breaks people, it does, and it's supposed to. There is a big question, because we don't punch in the head. Kicks are allowed in the head, but not punches. And there's a big debate, and there is a good criticism against that. There's a genuine criticism. I understand it. The reason we don't do it is that we know it's really, really, really bad for you, and the martial arts are not set up to be really, really bad for you. And so it was one of the reasons when we went into the cage, that was a question that he's addressing. Would our guys be able to A, defend their head, and B, would they be able to switch their target and hit in the head? And it was absolutely no problem at all. You know, of our first 20 professional fights, it was 16 wins, most by knockout. It just, because the more difficult thing is that why I hate those little sort of stupid little punches to the head that aren't punches at all. You either have to punch it or you don't, because me sort of just going like this, you should react like that look of contempt you're giving me now. That's what I want from you, because I don't want to teach you to react to something that's not dangerous, and I don't want to teach me to punch wrong. So you get that thing where, I could have got you, like it's a tag. That's not a punch, because I can throw my hand up really fast and reach you, but you'd react to the load, and I want you to see when you're in danger by the load. So trying to get in close to someone and hit hard to the body, it was easy, and is easy to change target when you need to. And I know people always say, yeah, but you train, you fight like you train. That's only true to a degree. You know, you drive like you drive until there's roadworks, and then you find a different route. You know, it wasn't a problem, and it could have been, but it wasn't. But it does mean you have to be intelligent to train in karate, and I believe this because you're not punching me in the head, but you're punching me in the body. For example, the beginners fight like this, you know, because they don't want to get hit in the body. They're tucked up. You've got to fight you've got to fight as if you're going to get punched in the head, while you're not. And that's why kicks are allowed, of course, to keep those hands up. But you've got to have your hands up as if you're going to get hit in the head. So you need to really be very conscious of the way you're fighting.
Very true. I switched from knockdown, so my first initial encounter in karate was knockdown karate. So I found it difficult because we never been taught to, you need to keep your hands up, just catch the kick, right? Yes. But now when I switched to more kind of light contact to the head, those hands automatically going up, and I think I still prefer to keep it low because I can maintain the longer distance. which brings me to distance and
Yeah.
and the fighting. What did take you into a cage? Why did you decide to go in? Just purely for testing, or?
Primarily, yes. See, I've been doing it a long time. So I was actually in the cage, not fighting, but I was in the cage at UFC 3 or 4, I think it was. And I was over there training with Nick Hughes, and he said, "Oh, there's a tournament on. Let's go and have a look." But that format is not new. That format was not. It's been repackaged, but people have been fighting without rules for longer than they've been fighting with rules, right? And Valet 2-Day and no laws. And around the early 90s, we were doing something called MFS, Modern Fighting Systems, which was fighting without just, just the fighting aspect of it. There was a lot of people playing around with those rules in the early 90s, and the UFC came up with, and Gracie Jutsu came up with the format that everyone kind of in the end bought into. But a lot of people were fighting like that, and a lot of people always have been and still are. MMA, as it's called now, it's nothing new at all. It's been done for centuries. But so I was going to say, so for a while, everyone would always say, there's always a zeitgeist. There's always a one of the martial arts that's the popular one, right? And for ages, everyone would be saying, "Oh yeah, but does it work in the street? Does it work in the street?" And then that switched around times. Does it work in the cage? And that's the only one I didn't have an answer to, because I was on the door for 15 years, and lots of people. At one time, to get a black belt, you had to do 6 months on the door with DKK, but we were much smaller then. But that doesn't. We don't do that anymore. So the answer: does it work on the street? Absolutely, yes. We knew that. Does it work on the mats? Yes. Like I said, we fought in knockdown with the Kyokushin. We fought in many forms, and yeah, it works in all those. But didn't have the answer to does it work in the cage. I knew the answer to it, but we didn't have it. And then we had a couple of people, because that's the testing ground. That's the modern testing ground. And a few people came around of our guys. They wanted to fight in the cage, so I said, okay, well we'll prepare up. Mainly Neil Grove, prepare up and do that and see. And our record even now is better than most MMA clubs. We took the heavyweight British title, held it for 4 years. We took a middleweight title, took a welterweight title, took Linton Vassell, who was the Bellator light heavyweight champion for a long time. One of his only 3 losses is to one of our orange belts. We did phenomenally well, and it wasn't about changing anything. It was just, obviously we trained more on that one-on-one, but we didn't really. We had to drop stuff out of training.
Yeah, sure.
And there was a little bit of proving it. Karate's got a really bad name, which doesn't really bother me. It keeps the arseholes away. I think, like I said, there's always the zeitgeist one. And MMA is there now, I would say, in that, upwards of 60% of the people, MMA fighters, don't want to fight. They want to go to an MMA club and say they do MMA. That's
sure.
And you always end up there, and then something else will take over. Previous to that, it was the ones that thought they were military. It was the Krav Maga and the ones that train in combat trousers. That sort of zeitgeist went through, and before that it was kickboxing. Before that it was karate, kung fu, and there's always a way. But there was an element of taking karate into that, because they hated it. They never would announce us as karate. We had gi tops on, belts. Never would they say that. From fight 1, they said background in MMA. They would not announce us as karate.
Why do you think that's going on?
I think because it was a move. All of that was a movement primarily to promote the early ones, to promote Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and BJJ. It then shifted, because the early mixed martial arts, I would argue it's not mixed, it's not martial, and it's not an art anymore. But the early ones, it was pitching fighter against fighter. You'd have a sumo guy against a sambo guy or something like that. The fight was mixed. Now the impression is that the fighter is mixed, i.e. they're doing bits of everything, and which is true, which makes it interesting to do and boring to watch, because when they stand up, they're not as good as boxers, and when it hits the ground, they're not as good as wrestlers. It's the same criticism I level against ourselves. Goju, it's this middle point, so you're not excelling at anything. You have this middle point. And so by putting karate in there, we wanted to test it in that ground. But also, and I've said this to people before, because because we did, and I eventually just got bored of it. I'll be honest. We came out because I got bored of it, but because we've done it, that means that not everybody has to go and test themselves in there. We tested karate's training mechanisms so other people don't have to. Not everyone has to test everything, right? We went in there, tested it. As far as I'm concerned, proved everything we needed to prove. It was probably in there 5 years too long, to be honest. But so other people don't have to test it because we test that, because you've got to continually test what you're doing. It needs testing. Everything needs. They talk about pressure testing. I don't know what the pressure bit is. Just testing. It needs to be refreshed every now and then, and to make sure that what you're teaching is relevant. And we'd learned a lot of stuff, and there were tweaks to the techniques that we'd done because it's been refreshed against new blood. And that's important, but they're not new techniques. There hasn't been a new technique in probably 10,000 years. They're the old techniques, and you've got to remember that in karate, a lot of stuff is codified. There is hidden stuff in the kata that needs breaking down, but you're supposed to take it out and break it down, not just do the kata. The kata is a training guide, not the training in itself.
For sure. You mentioned something which actually sparked interest. How would you arrange a working on the door for your students? Because I'm a tiny guy. I don't really fancy being on the door because I know I have to do something, and I'm not that comfortable with I've got very big nose and I don't like it to be that way.
Like keep it straight.
Yeah. How would you arrange that? You own your own company, or how does that work?
Well, Dan Lewis, who runs the DKK with me, yes, we had ArmorSec running. He sort of headed up ArmorSec, so that we had our own security company there. We had access to some really sort of relatively, not relatively, I mean, you can get in trouble wherever you stand there, but relatively, I would say, easy doors. It wasn't necessarily East End pubs, although we had those too. And so I knew a lot of doormen, I knew a lot of things, and they would give people a chance. And also because of the training, they did know that our guys would be capable before I put them. I wouldn't just take someone that was going to get seriously hurt and put them on a door. But I don't even agree with that as a policy anymore. It was a space and time, and it worked well for a while. But I wouldn't do it now, nor do I think it's necessary for everyone to have done that. It's along that, the old argument, do you need to have done it to teach it? And I don't think so. I'm on the side that you don't, but you do need to be very close to people that have. Like the military, it's the same. They haven't all been to war, but you've got to be fairly close to someone that has.
Yeah, that's true. So you can learn from the experience and hear it from first.
Yeah, back to saying, otherwise you start from zero every time. So if everybody has to do everything again themselves, nobody's ever going to learn. You're not going to progress. If I've got a certain amount of knowledge which I'll pass on to you, whether you've done it or not, you're supposed to take it further than I did. If you're younger than me and I've taught you up to a level, you're supposed to take that and do more with it, not less.
Yeah. The other question that comes up, because I'm kind of pro sporting and as a testing ground, but I've got quite a lot of pushback from the traditional martial artists that you can't do this in sport, you can't do that. What's your take on it? Did you have the pushback that you're doing MMA and stuff like that?
No, not really. No, we didn't. We do. There's people that do. I'm sure there's people that look at us and say, I've had people just say we're just brutal, and that's not. That's not how it should be done. But that, like I said, it's a change of opinion about how to do it. So I think tournament is a good testing ground, as you've said. So someone that says you shouldn't do any of it, okay, that's fair enough. How do you test it? So you can't just take stuff out. You got to replace it, right? So say we take bunny hops or some exercise that's been proven to be bad. You can't just take it out. You've got to figure out what it was trying to do, what it was trying to strengthen. Was it actually a physical or a mental exercise, and replace it with something? And if you say you don't do tournament, fair enough, absolutely fair enough. How do you test your guys? Where is your test? And all tournament has its flaws. you know, in terms of an actual fight. But even an actual fight between two men is actually usually stylized. You know, say if we got into an argument and we go outside and I punch you in the face, I'm doing you a favour. That's almost the kindest thing I can do, because I'm not sticking my thumb in, gouging your eyes out.
Yeah.
You know, so people don't realise that they're fighting in a ritualistic way by using fists, but they are. It's a sort of mammalian kind of chest beating, and that's why when women fight, they fight more rarely, but they're actually they fight far better for the weapons we've been given, because they're actually fighting, whereas men usually are fighting out of a ritual. And the occasional man that fights like a woman, teeth and claw, is quite rightly labelled a complete psychopath, because they're ripping, you know, they're biting people's noses off and ripping their ears off using teeth and claw. Whereas to use a blunt instrument is a sort of stylized way. So I think tournament is a really good idea. We do two a year that we have, and then, you know, mostly if you want to do tournament, I would say fight the cage. But we do have a couple that are not that level. And I think it's important because it does teach you, it's different. So it doesn't matter how hard your fighting is, sparring is. People confuse the two, but sparring in the dojo with people you know is a different thing. Sparring in a grading is a different thing. It's only really in tournament where you're facing someone who's not completely knackered that wants to beat you.
Yeah.
You know, when you fight hard in the club, you're not actually trying to beat someone. You know, well, you sort of are, but you're not really.
Well, you try to improve both, right? So
yes.
If you're your sparring partner, you kind of
want
to grow.
Yes. So the value to me of tournament is facing fear, and that's a big deal. That's a big, to me, that's probably the biggest definition of a martial artist, and a martial art is facing fear, and the tournament does that. You know, I was talking to someone recently, talking about how I remember throwing up, you know, physically vomiting before a fight, but still getting up and fighting.
Yeah, I find, you know, I don't have experience in being on the doors and stuff like that. I had a couple of alternation back in Poland when I was 17, 18, and to be honest, stepping into the mats, for me it was the exactly same adrenaline rush. So for me, being in a environment of a sporting gives me the closest I can get to real fight in terms of fear, like you said, not skills, but just that feeling that this guy or that girl gonna be trying to really kill me, not just play with me in a dojo, like you said. So,
yeah. It's why I personally I hate that kind of BJJ fist bump slap before you roll. And I know it fits with BJJ and its ethos, which has that. But people start doing it in the dojo. I don't do that here. You know, people start doing it because what it's trying to do is it's sort of saying, you know, this is just a bit of fun. Don't worry. Whereas I don't want that. I want that intensity where you bow into someone and think, you know, they could be in your friend and you're like, fuck, what have I said? What have I done? Why is this so? So, like I said, Goju is a full contact system, but we don't fight full contact all the time. And I say to our guys, if two of you arrive and you're pissed off and had a shitty day at work, go for it. It's up to you. You know, but also, we talk about fear. I also think that there has to be fear present in a dojo. And I'll say to all of our members at some point should walk down the stairs and think, no, I can't do it today. Or be at work and think, no, I can't. That should be present. If it's not, I don't think the training's hard enough. Everyone should, I'm not talking about scared stiff all the time, but occasionally just think, oh, I can't do it. That's good. That's healthy.
I think I disagree with you about that, but I've got different clients, because for me it's all about the safety and feeling welcome and non-judged. But I
See, that's quite interesting, and I did think it was interesting when I agreed to do this with you, because we do disagree on stuff. I know we do, and but the stuff we disagreed off, I can see your logic. It's not. I don't think, you know, I can always see the logic in it, and it makes sense, and it entirely makes sense on who your student base is. You know, because I think there is. I mean, I don't teach children, but I don't. It's not a philosophical thing. I think it's great that children are taught, and it's, if anything, it's hypocritical, because I was taught as a child. I just don't want to do it, but it's brilliant it's a brilliant way to bring kids up. It's excellent. I'm really glad other people do it, and then they can graduate and they can come to me when they're 18. That sort of thing is really good. And Yeah, it depends very much. You know, if you're catchment base, or the people where you live around are all elderly or something, they should still be taught, and it's still karate, it's still martial arts, it's still useful. So it's not that when I say how I train and teach and my beliefs, it's not necessarily, I don't necessarily put those beliefs on every other club and think because they're not doing that, they're not right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do, like I said, I respect the conversation with you because it always puts the different, I really like, I believe we're sitting in a bubble, right? And you can only see things within a bubble, and you need people from the outside of the bubble coming in, telling you, this can be different, this can be different, because then
Yeah.
only then you can get from out of the bubble and have a look, right? So I'm coming from the dojo, we had the same mentality as yours, and I loved it. But now working with people with mental health and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I found it more beneficial for them
Yes.
to be safe and pushed, but knowing that it's safe. But the outcomes are the same, because when people used to go to our dojo, they said, "Oh, your guys don't fear fighting, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And in our dojo, we spar every session, and we had the guys from Germany coming, and the comment was to me, "How do you make people have no fear of sparring?" I was thinking
Yeah.
about it. There's two ways, right? You either get them used to it, to the fear, or you nurture them in sparring, but normal sparring, so not avoiding sparring,
Agreed.
and you make them feel comfortable,
Yeah.
so they find that sparring as something enjoyable. So
Yeah.
I think we've got the same goal, but different ways, in a way.
Yeah. Well, and that's back to my point, is that a different style should be a different of opinion how to get someone to the same place. That's
Mhm.
entirely in keeping with my beliefs. You know, it's about how do you get these people to this point, normally a black belt level. How do you get people there? And that, to go back to what I originally said, that depends on what people you've got.
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah, if that's what it takes to get your people through, then I would absolutely respect that.
I think big difference for me is that I never call it a self-defense club. We're working for
Yeah.
our health. I don't try to put myself there as after training you're gonna be 100% able to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
there's a problem with some of karate schools who think they do self-defense, but they really do sports or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem, is not being clear about what you're doing. And I think Will Gainsworth, I don't know, I think he talks about having a sort of social, he talks about it as social karate, and I think he's found it quite liberating to lose
Mm,
that tag. Um, yeah, I think the biggest problem is not people doing sport or doing this. It's like you said, it's people who are doing sport but don't realize it. I
mm,
think that's the biggest problem. And that's down to the instructor not being clear about what they're training for. But that's
yeah.
also understandable because it's a very multifaceted reason why you're training. It usually isn't. I mean, you start for self-defense, but I can teach someone to fight in 6 weeks. That's not what keeps you going. And then it becomes you probably can't tell me why you still train, and
Mm,
that in itself helps me. That proves it's an art, because you can't talk about art. Art is something that you poets and songwriters can express things that we can't. That's what poetry's for, right? They can say things that we can't, but we still feel those things. And the reason you train in karate or martial arts, you don't know anymore. You do know, you just can't express it. That's because it's an art.
I do agree with you, 100%. Which brings us to mentality and self-defense and confidence. Um, what was the impact of martial arts on your mental health? Do you think there was any, or beneficial, negative?
That's a good question. I think it's difficult for me to say because like I said, I've trained longer than I can kind of remember. So there was not this sort of
Point.
sharp line where I didn't train and then all of a sudden I did and it was amazing. I don't really have that, but I can say that we're probably going to talk about the fact I have cancer and I'm in that at the moment. But I can say that the mindset developed through martial arts, I believe, I don't know how to have got through without it.
Mhm.
I think I find the thought of not having that training quite terrifying. Um, to face something like this, which isn't a physical threat. It's never where I thought my martial arts were for. But
Mhm.
actually, this battle has been the biggest, and it's primarily a mental battle. It's by far the biggest, and what I hadn't realized is that my training was preparing me for it. I just didn't realize that, because ultimately martial arts, as we say, it's hard to say what they're about, but ultimately they're about looking at yourself. They're about discovering yourself, bettering yourself, and they teach you tools. But the important thing is the vehicle is combat. That's our vehicle. It's always got to be combat. The way we do that is combat. The way other people do it may be playing chess or, painting. I don't know. But for us, the vehicle to self-discovery is combat. So the combat has to be present, and it has to be tough. It has to be hard. Otherwise, the furnace isn't hot enough. But what I didn't realize was those lessons that I've been taught through physicality, the ability when you fight to actually kind of, it's hard to describe and you sound like a nutcase, I know, but sit outside yourself and watch, like you're outside your body when you fight, watching it, so you can redirect, you can see what's going on and think at a slower pace. That's ultimately what I was able to use to help me cope with the pain that I had to go through, and the sickness, and it's the ability to sort of compartmentalize and put the pain in one space. It didn't always work. I'm maybe not good enough martial artist to do it to the level of pain I experienced, but it worked to a great degree. And those were lessons from combat.
Yeah, I'm finding, I know that people have a really big problem talking about cancer, different illnesses and stuff like that. It was very interesting for me starting to work with people with a multitude of disabilities.
Sorry, Les, can you give me 1 second, please? Can you just give me 1 second?
No problem.
Sorry, thank you. Say that again.
No, so for me it was interesting working with people with multitude of disabilities, from like MS, cancer, deafness, and what comes to my class, because I never been taught how to talk with people without saying, "Oh, it's gonna be fine."
Yeah.
I said that before, that my first lesson was 10 people coming in, and I'm asking, how are you? And each of them said, "Oh, it's shit today. I feel really bad." And then you kind of took back thinking, now, how do I reply to that, right? Because I was expecting it's all fine. So I kind of, it might sound wrong, but I enjoyed your straightforward commentary and, writing down what's going on with your life. I know I'm not always replying, but I'm reading it.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to not put the cotton wool, I think that we're saying, wool over it, so, nice and soft, and to not upset people. You just say how it is, and it's very refreshing. And did you done that on purpose, or you couldn't be bothered to put it politely?
Before I answer that, I would say that I did notice when you first came on, I don't know if it's on the recording or not, you said to me, "How are you today?"
Mm-hmm.
That's massively different from "How are you?"
Yeah.
Because that's the right question. Because today I'm good. Tomorrow I don't know. Yesterday was bad. Well, not to guess about, the question, "How are you today?" is exactly the right one for the situation you're talking about. And so to get to your question, it was a deliberate thing. And it came about because when I was diagnosed back in summer, I was immediately ashamed and embarrassed by it. And I know that's not logical, but logic and feelings don't go hand in hand. I thought, this is me. I'm Gavin Mulholland. This shouldn't happen to people like us, which of course is nonsense, because who should it happen to? It's nonsense, and I know it, but nonetheless, it was true. And then I realized, once I had that realization, I realized that the reason I didn't want to talk about it, and the reason I didn't want to talk about it was I was embarrassed by it. And that gave me the utter clarity that means I'm hiding from it. And I then realized I cannot hide from it and fight it at the same time. Those two things are incompatible. You can't hide and fight. It's one or the other. And the only way I could think to flush it completely into the open was to be completely open with everybody and to go entirely public. And there were some bits I held back, but mostly not. I determined to say how I was feeling when I was feeling it, and hopefully help someone else. But I'd be lying if I said that was my primary reason for it. I hope it does. People have asked me if it was cathartic. It wasn't. I just put down how I was feeling, and what my experience of going through this has been.
Mm. I think there's quite a big parallels with it, and I don't know if that's an upbringing or emphasis on men's behavior that we shouldn't talk about things like that. And I think cancer and mental health are both in the same category. That, like you said, is shameful, right? You don't say that
Yeah.
it's shameful you broke your leg or something. You go, yes, look, my cast.
Yeah,
It's
right.
all I've been tough, right? But when you
Yeah,
got a mental health issue or cancer, it's like, oh, hush, hush, or don't say it because you're gonna make people feel bad about it.
yeah,
It's still that stigma, which people like yourself and hopefully I feel a little bit me as well, can change that perception of that is shameful, that you shouldn't talk about it. We should talk about it because we can help other people through our experiences, and as well help researchers and whoever goes, because you saying exactly on the day how you're feeling,
yeah,
and then they can do more research and make better adjustments for people with different conditions.
yeah, yeah. And the idea that men don't talk, I have a slight issue with it. And while I know it's true, I have a slight issue with it in that men have always talked. We talk in pubs, and it's the
Mm,
pubs that have gone. That's,
yeah.
to me, that's the big problem, is our spaces have gone. Um, and a lot of it started around I don't know if you remember Bob Hoskins and the BT ads in the sort of
Yeah.
early 80s, which was all, men need to talk. And it was actually done by BT, and it was to try to get men to speak more on the phone because they
Mhm.
made more money out of it, because women tended to talk to their friends on the phone and men said, what time are you meeting? And that was that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, that kind of fed into, that's ripped into kind of mainstream society, thinking that men don't talk at all. And I have a slight issue with it. I know there is issues, and it needs to be brought out. But for example, coming back from battle, many of those men didn't need to talk until they got separated from the other men that had
Mhm.
experienced the same thing. What you needed was to sit with men that had also gone through it and maybe not talk, because you were with people that knew exactly. The problem comes when you get separated out to
Mhm.
people that can't understand. And that's not just a matter of sitting down talking to someone else that can't understand. It's a matter of being with people that have been through it. And that happened in our working men's clubs and the pubs we had around. So
Mhm.
we've created, I think, I'm not saying that there isn't a need for men to talk, but we've created a very toxic environment where there's a kind of almost female model of talking being placed over men, because what we're supposed to be is equal but different, right? Not
Yeah.
exactly the same. And our grandfathers, rightly or wrongly, would have thrown themselves under a train before crying in front of their family, and that's probably going too far, but there was a reason for it. There's a reason for it, because they had responsibility, and that responsibility fed into their perception of maleness, which could be bad for them, but it could also be good. And I think
Mhm.
the perception of maleness now has taken on quite a negative turn, and I think that's leading to a lot of problems. Pretty
Mhm.
much everything that used to be masculine or male is framed negatively now. If you're big and muscular, you're in the media, you're deemed to be stupid. You're thick. And aggression is now a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. Aggression is a good thing, but it's framed as if it's a bad thing now, but it's primarily a male trait.
Mhm.
Not entirely, of course, nothing is, but a lot of what was male has been framed. When I did my thesis on the psychological effects of martial arts training, and I looked at three things. I looked at state mood, um, what was it? State mood, stress levels, and I started off looking at aggression. And I'd
Mhm.
fallen into the same trap. And I realized really quickly, actually, the problem is I'm training people to be aggressive. It's not a bad thing, controlled aggression. So I switched that to looking at innate anger levels.
Mhm.
And just as an aside, all those things improved through 6 months of martial arts training. But I'd even fall into it, sort of framing aggression as if it's bad, but it's not.
Mhm.
Anger is a bad, well, uncontrolled anger is a bad thing. But aggression is actually something we train into people. And I think one of the problems that's leading to much more mental health is this: people don't quite know the shift of what it means. The sort of traditional roles, I suppose you could say, may not be the right ones, but people, I think, struggle to know what is acceptable and what isn't. And I think
Mhm.
what you do is really helping people to see what those things might be.
I was on an aggression point. I was listening to, what's his name? One of the I'm very, my memory is very good but very short, so I can't remember names and stuff like that. But psychologist was saying that the issue is the suppressing the aggressiveness, because the aggression is our a self-protection mechanism to keep us safe, right? If somebody is threatening you, you go aggressive to defend yourself.
Right.
But now we try to team it, suppress that aggression.
Yeah, make them timid, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't get angry, and don't do that. And we started that with children. I now change because I fell in that trap to my son of you getting angry with his sister, and I say, oh, don't be angry with her, which I should say, I understand you're angry.
Yeah.
Let's go and release that anger somewhere. You don't have to beat her up. Or we can go and let's grab the flag.
What do you do with it? It's like the internet now is full of people saying that nobody should be offended. You should be offended. Of course, if nobody's offended, you don't do anything. I should absolutely be offended. I'm offended if I see some woman being abused in the street. Of course I'm offended. And I'm going to do something about it because I'm offended. Of course you should be offended. This concept that you shouldn't feel these things and that somehow I've got a right not to be offended is absolute nonsense. And if it do something that offends me, I then, does that then translate? What happens to that? Does that translate into anger? Which it might. Mm-hmm. Or does it translate into me writing a stiff letter to someone, or just going and sitting with some girl on the tube so she's not feeling so uncomfortable, etc., and having a word, or do you have a word with the guy who's being an ass, or do you say to the girls to come with me? What do you do? But the response is what's important. You should feel anger. These are natural things. I years ago qualified as a hypnotherapist. And I disagreed, so I've never worked it professionally because I disagreed fundamentally with it. We were talking about, with the professors, talking about repressions, when you repress something. And they said, well, everyone's got them. And I said, my argument there was, well, if everyone's got them, so if only a few people have them, it sounds like something's, some wiring's gone wrong and maybe we should go in and try and fix it. But if you're saying everyone's got it, then it's a natural coping mechanism and we should probably leave it alone. Which one is it? If everybody has it, then it's naturally probably there for a good reason. But if only a few people get it, something's probably gone wrong. So it all comes down to what you do with those things. Do aggressive people become violent? Some do, most don't.
Yeah, I think that brings us nicely to the internet realm, and people, just being aggressive for sake of being aggressive. I find sometimes they looking for ways to release that aggression through typing because it's so safe.
And I know you put a lot of stuff up, and I admire you for that because I won't put anything on. In fact, we banned, filming of the 30 Man is banned. Mm-hmm. Don't put anything up because I just know what's going to happen. What you're going to end up is fight 27, some completely exhausted bloke getting beaten up and flailing around. It's not going to look good. Mm-hmm. But when you see, and that's the other thing you'll never see is me or any of DKK putting clips of rubbish martial arts out and slagging it off or laughing at it. You'll never see that. It's the complete ban because no matter how, it's not that I don't think it's rubbish. I can see it's rubbish, but you don't know the context. You don't know. We don't know the context. We don't know if they're even saying, look at, just messing around, or this is how it's not should be done, or this is just a drill to get that shoulder down. You don't know what they're doing. So just, my thing is to anyone that criticizes, and I'll say this because I know you're getting some because you've got enough courage to put stuff up there. But the only real criticism is, okay, post it yourself then. If I'm doing it wrong, film yourself doing it and show me. Otherwise, shut up.
They never do.
No, they won't, because that's nonsense. But otherwise, just shut up. So I do get what you mean, and I sort of appreciate you've got courage in just facing that. But I'm sure I can hear that it wearies you from time to time.
Sometimes, yeah, but it's much less. So I started doing it as a challenge,
right?
Because the one thing which sets up my an anxiety huge is a judgment, fear of judgment. I've always been
right.
What people think. So I thought the only way to combat this is like inspiring.
Perfect. Yeah.
Get it. So I do it, and now it rarely gets me. If I post, the problem is my English is not perfect. So, usually you see
Better
my
than my
post.
Polish.
I heard that every time.
Yeah,
You often see that after a couple of hours, I edit my comment
right,
because my wife looked at it and said, "You're looking for a fight. You don't want to do." I said, "No, I didn't mean that.
right.
I just wrote it in my version of polite English."
Yeah,
And then I have to correct it, like about the Shotokan. I didn't meant Shotokan. I meant all the martial artists, but it came up Shotokan. But hey ho.
right. Yeah,
But yeah. So by exposure, I'm getting thick skin, so it doesn't
yeah.
bother me that much.
Good.
And to be honest, being a content creator, um, it means that gives me topics to talk, engaging posts.
Yeah,
Especially if you're really criticizing me, I can kind of deconstruct it and try it. But but because of that, the nice conversation come up with people like yourself, right?
right.
Because then you look at it and you say, oh, actually, I don't agree with this and this, and then I can think about my thinking process and change things.
Yeah, right. And I said at the start, again, probably not on tape, but I kind of feel like I know you already, and we've never met.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the social media stuff is really good if it's used correctly. Really good.
Mm. Yeah, it's just you just have to don't take it personally. It's somebody's frustration, not yours.
Yeah, right. So that's the difficult bit, though, is not taking it personally. But you're
Um,
facing, you say you're facing a fear. That's absolutely fantastic. I said to me, that's fundamental of a martial arts. Is facing your fears, whatever they might
uh,
be.
what's in the future for you? Except the fighting Big C, you had some good news so far. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping it's gonna be all good from now on. Not probably easy and not perfect as it was. But what's your mind frame and what's your goals?
See, it's probably the worst time of my life to ask me that. In that, I generally don't have any. I have had some good news, and I was hesitant to celebrate it. I've had the first scan post treatment, and it's looking good. But they're not saying it's worked until they do that again in a few months' time. That's when he's still there. There's the pictures frozen. I don't know if you're still there or not. I suspect not. We back?
Sorry, I lost you there. Yeah, for a
Yeah, I
second.
thought so. I was just saying. So I have had some good news. I had the first post-treatment scan, and it was positive. But they're saying, it's not definite that it's worked. They'll need to do that again to say yes or no. But I realised I was being a little bit overly cautious, and I should celebrate the good news.
Definitely.
However, I'm really genuinely not looking forward. I'm not. I during the treatment which was 6 weeks of daily radiotherapy and chemotherapy every day, and it was brutal beyond description, beyond I was able to write. But the thing that terrified me was on day 5 when I looked up at how far I had to go, and it was terrifying. It's one of the really shaky days. So I really did move in then to day, moving day to day. The day before New Year's Eve, someone said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. We'll see tomorrow." And I'm still in that space where I'm really not looking forward. So I don't know what the future holds for me. It's hopefully brighter than it has been, but I'm really just not looking that far. But even when I wasn't going through this, when people would say to me, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?" Even then, I would be saying, "I don't think like that, and I don't have plans. I take what comes and hopefully make the best of it."
Looking for positives again. I'm not sure if it's the right question, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Do you feel that you live your life now from day to day to the fullest compared to before cancer?
No, not at the moment. I don't. I there are things like the whole Christmas thing. I felt this Christmas like I sort of sat on the outside looking in, even at our karate Christmas do. I felt we went bowling and stuff. I felt I was sort of watching everyone else, which is fair enough. But it was two-pronged because I'm just too exhausted to have the chaos of Christmas and everyone around eating and all that. And on the other hand, I wanted to see everyone more than ever because I appreciate them more than ever. I've definitely seen a different side to people I said all I've ever done my whole life is just punch and kick people and be mean to people, and all I've got back was love. And it's just been incredible. And I have to hold myself to a higher standard when I get through this. People have shown me such kindness. It is beyond anything I deserve, and it's just been incredible. And I need to try, and my view of a martial artist has changed slightly from, someone tough as nails but heart of gold, and generous spirit. And I need to work on those last two. I really do, because I'm good with people I know. I'm good with my friends. I'm loyal and I'm trustworthy and I'm good with them. But what I got was people doing that didn't know me that well. And I have to expand that. Anyway, and I've realized anyone can be nice to your friends, right? Anyone, that's not, anyone can do that. To help someone who's in trouble that you don't know that well, that's the standard I need to hold myself to, because that's what I've been shown. So I wouldn't say I'm living my life to the full at the moment, but I have also realized, at some point I've got to go back to work, but I've absolutely realized that I will not be missing anything again. If we're coming to play at a festival or even go to a festival, if I've got the chance to spend 3 days in a field with my brothers, drinking, listening to music and getting up to mischief, then that's where I'm going to be. And if it's not my weekend off, I will resign. Genuinely, I will say, you can have my resignation or I'll see you Monday, but I'm not missing those things anymore. If I can get there, that's where I'll be.
It was really heartwarming to see the response you got from people all over the world, and it puts the, we talk all the time about negatives on online and stuff like that.
We do.
But seeing the response, it was just amazing warmth and decency, and people from all over the place, and just
it was incredible. And it's a source of pride to me that people have been saying prayers for me in churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, stone circle, everyone their own belief system. And that is a source of pride to me that people have done that. People say to me, I don't know what your beliefs are, but I want to pray for you. And I say, it doesn't matter what my beliefs are, but thank you, please do. And it's slightly annoying actually, because Goran set up a fund for me, which has been absolutely amazing. And I was thinking, if I get 20 quid in there, at least I can get a taxi to hospital. But it ends up with thousands of pounds in there. And it's been fantastic, because it's enabled me to not worry about money at the time, just focus on my health, to get taxis in and out. But it's slightly annoying, because I don't think I can ever be mean to anyone again, because they might have chucked a tenner in, they might have done something. They probably did. So I've got to be nice to people now.
I think that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think so too. Utterly incredible.
Knowing that you've got a community of supporters behind you, it just makes life a bit more comfortable, I guess.
Someone asked me what I had learned through this about the martial arts community, and what I actually learned is that there is one. I never really saw one. The Goju is good. Goju is quite tight, but even then. But what I learned that there is one. I felt this army of people closing behind me in support and love, and supporting me, not with money, but not just money, with things they could do or gifts they sent, just stuff that lifted my day. It was and is incredible to me, and I don't understand it. And I've also realized a flaw in myself, in that I can handle aggressive men and I can handle violence, but what I'm totally terrible at is kindness. And I don't know what that is. That's what breaks me down. That's what fundamentally broke me, was people being kind to me. And there's got to be something wrong with that, right?
Yeah, we do feel that sometimes. Yeah, but I genuinely believe the phrase I coined in that the strong and caring people are the pillars of society, and I think the karate and other martial arts do that very well.
So that's gone into my new definition. So I put something up recently. Is it a combat art or is it a martial art, a combat sport or martial art? And one of the main things for me is there anyone in their 80s doing it? And if they're not, it's probably a sport. And I would add that anyone can train when, like I said, anyone can be nice to their family. Anyone can train when you're young, fit, and strong, right? That's what sports people do. Sports people train every bit as hard as us, if not harder, but only while they're young and fit and strong. Martial arts push on beyond that. into things. So that's going to be interesting. So BJJ, for example, is it a sport or is it a martial art? And I don't know yet. I don't know the answer to that yet. I need to see people in their 70s and 80s training.
Yeah, time will show.
Time will tell.
Yeah, what the condition is there. So far, I'm kind of following BJJ stage and listen to the guys who are a bit older. And so far, I hear broken discs and a lot of injuries. So we see how that's gonna be. Because
yeah, we'll see that pan out. So a martial art to me, they push beyond that young, fit, and healthy stage, and now they are hard as nails but heart of gold. That goes into it for me, because that's what I got from the senior Goju, people like George Andrews and Tony Christian and Ken Roberts and Dave Arnold. What I got was this huge level of support from these very tough guys, and just absolute heart of gold. And it's, I said to one, why have you done that? He gave me an immense amount of money. I said, why? I don't really know him very well. And he looked puzzled. He looked puzzled and said, you've got to feed your family. Like he didn't understand the question. And I said, well, you need that money. There's no such thing as spare money. He said, I'll get that back. God will provide, or something, he said.
Yeah, that's really nice to have that backup.
And I've always had these men that I aspire to be. I want to be this martial artist. I want to be that guy. And now I've added into that through this. I want to be that generous, good heart, and that's never been a part of my martial arts. I won't lie. I won't pretend it has. But now that's what I want to aspire to. I want to be hard as nails, good heart, generous spirit. That's been added into it, and that's through this period of time that I've gone through, because that's what I've seen in those top guys that I only ever saw as tough guys before.
You can say that it's in every cloud silver lining. Yeah, that's a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's learning in everything, and I've learned a lot about myself and about a lot of stuff through this. Definitely, there's learning in everything. I always said it's not. I used to annoy me when people said, "Oh, it's a battle." You're battling cancer. You're not battling it. And I said it's not a battle, but I was slightly wrong. It is a battle, just not the one I thought it was. It's a mental. It's a mental battle to keep focused and keep positive. I hate the word. I hate the thought of keeping positive, because there's a sort of unreality about it. There's kind of not facing what's actually going on, but to frame stuff in the right way is important.
It's more like overcoming every day as it comes, isn't it? Just to turn up and be there. Because I listened to your other interview with World of Martial Arts, and you've been saying about you sitting on a bench and frozen to go into the hospital, and that it takes immense mental power to overcome it and actually force yourself to do things that even your body knows you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. And that's what I was so shocked about that instance. So just so your listeners here, I was waiting to go into the hospital one day, and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And I got my head straight, went to go, and I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. I was literally scared stiff and couldn't move. And that was the weird thing, is that I was also arguing with because I got my head straight, and saying, "Come on, we've got to go. We have to go," and my body wouldn't. And to have to see that separation of mind and body was fascinating.
One last question, because it just come out to my mind, because I see that we're working with people with mental health as well, and I'm sure that you went through the similar process, that when it not touches us, we imagine how we would deal with it, right? How would I would deal with cancer? I've got that image. It's something like with children, right? How you're gonna bring your children, then they come in and it's completely different. So you how to say it? What was your clash with thing that you maybe fought before and now? Very different.
That's very interesting. One of my brothers died a couple of years ago of cancer. He had it when he was very young, and he kept coming back, and he died of it. And actually, what I realized when it was my turn was how little I'd thought about it. How little I thought about how I would face it, how little I thought about how he faced it, and how little I realized how courageously he faced it. So it's almost the opposite of that. I felt like I was looking back, it feels like you're just skimming over the top of life. And I've used the drowning analogy, which I don't know if you saw or not, but
I heard you.
Absolutely felt like you're on a boat. You know, you've got the same worries as everyone else, and then all of a sudden you're in the ocean, deep, dark, black, and everyone else who's sort of trying to help you and bless every one of them, but you're the only one in the water. And I had genuinely never really considered it or thought, how would I be dealing with this? Even when I held Mike's hand on his deathbed, I hadn't really considered my response to it. But when it was my turn, I just hope and continue to hope that I can face it as bravely and with as much dignity as he did, and humor. You know, he was still laughing about stuff, as have I been. You know, there is funny stuff in it, there just genuinely is, but I hadn't really thought about how I would deal with this, and that's the striking thing, was how little I thought about it, even having someone so close to me go through it.
I think you're doing a great job. Seeing how you treating it, how you handle yourself, how you connect with people. I think you're doing great job, and there's a humor in it. So I think your
Well, thank
brother
you.
would be you would be equal. I think
Yeah.
there is nothing you can think low about yourself.
Well, thank you.
I think it will be time to say goodbye, and I will say
Yes.
I hope that tomorrow will be another great day for you.
Thank you, Les. That's brilliant, and I hope so too. And I'm you know, whatever comes, I'll face it when it comes. But I hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Have a good day.
Are you happy with everything? I'm just